So if you saw the race between sort of stock Mopars and us, you might be wondering what happened to the oil pump. Why did we lose oil pressure? There was a lot of speculation and theories in the video and stuff, and a lot of panic and chaos trying to figure out what happened, why we lost oil pressure, and then why did we get too much oil pressure, and where are we at now? Well, obviously the car's running now. We've got oil pressure now. I changed the oil pump. So here's the video on basically trying to understand how the oil pump works and why everything happened the way it did. All right, so this is a big block oil pump. It's just an old pump I had laying around. It's just for illustration purposes. It's not from Dorothy. So this mates up against the block that's connected to the oil pickup. So the intake for the oil pump is here, right? Comes into that hole back there. It's compressing it, creating pressure, and then it's pushing it into this hole here on the face of the oil pump. The oil goes through this hole, comes out of this oil hole, and goes on the outside of the oil filter, goes through the oil filter, down the center of the oil filter, and then comes back up out of this hole, back in through this hole, and back into the block here, right? And then you have this pressure relief valve here, and how I think it works, this is where I'm not 100% sure, but if there was some, say, blockage in the filter, too much pressure, then this would activate and allow, it would give a pressure release. It would open to some degree to let oil back around, basically just looping around like this. So it doesn't bypass the filter in any way. So if you lose a filter or the filter gets completely clogged, you've got a problem. That's why you have an oil pressure light or oil pressure gauge, right? You have to stop. It's not going to bypass it. So this kind of controls the pressure. If the pressure gets too high, it goes into release mode. All right? So this is what I think is wrong with the oil system. This is why we lost oil pressure. I think it's not bleeding off. I think it's like having a straw in your soda that has a crack in it. Our oil pump did not have this gasket in there. Your pickup is like the straw. So you're trying to suck fluid up through that straw, through the block, and into the oil pump, but you have a leak here because there's no O-ring. So instead of pulling oil, which is difficult to do through the pickup and the block, it's pulling air through here. And we're losing our prime, right? Then, so we got an O-ring, we put it on there. I think we probably, Chris said that the spring felt weak, and maybe it was, but when he put the bolt in there to kind of, that increased the pressure and prevented this from relieving pressure. So we got full pressure with no pressure relief, and that's why it tilted, went over 100 psi and damaged the oil pressure gauge. So we had a lot to overcome that night. So we're gonna put a new oil pump on Dorothy and see if we can fix our oil pressure problem. I'm pretty confident that the reason we lost oil pressure in the first place was because this O-ring wasn't there. Putting a new pump on it, we'll have a new O-ring, so we'll have a seal. We won't have any problem picking that up. The actual pressure we'll have a new pump with a new pressure release valve and everything that's not compromised, like a weak spring or a bolt put in there. And hopefully that fixes that issue. See, so hopefully you can see that Wix filter is completely blown out. It's ballooned.
And Osborne.
Oh, it's a little fat.
F-150.
It's a fat old oil filter.
A little fatty. So our original problem was we didn't have any oil pressure, which I believe the O-ring caused that.
The Gambler 5 and 6.
Isn't there supposed to be an O-ring there?
We ended up getting an O-ring borrowed from a racer at the track. We got that fixed, but then we put the bolt inside that pressure release valve, which caused us to get full pressure.
Yeah. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put a bolt in it to give it some gap, or to give it some.
But hey, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this though.
Resistance.
Let me ask you
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. Can you kick my ass?
will the bolt bottom out?
Bottom out on what?
Because it's gotta push that.
Spring super hard.
Oh yeah, you're right. Okay.
Right.
Instead of being regulated, you know, say at 70 psi max or 75 psi max, the pressure relief, you know, which is what basically when you're at idle, the pressure relief valve is going to be closed. You're going to get full pressure through the motor, and then when you rev it at high RPM, that pressure relief valve opens so that it doesn't have that full pressure to the system, because now the pump's spinning faster. So it's going to open once the RPMs are picked up, and when it opens, it's going to keep it from going over 75 psi or something like that. So when we put that bolt in there to try to increase the oil pressure, it basically disabled, I believe it disabled the pressure relief valve completely and allowed it to go full pressure, which now we've got, you know, over 100 psi, which also broke the pressure gauge. So, and we also, one of our fixes was to go with the thicker oil. So I imagine if we'd just done the O-ring, I think we would have fixed everything. If we didn't have an O-ring and we had basically disabled the pressure relief valve, that probably would have helped it at idle, but I don't know about full RPM. That might have blown up the oil filter. So
Dominique
Pop the filter
with
off.
the single pass first round now. Let's go with the SRJ Simron.
Yeah, you don't want over 100 psi of fuel of oil.
no, it's like 75 at idle right now.
I know.
When you start driving, though, it'll drop down.
Oh, I see.
He said it's gonna go. That's not
Left
gonna
lane
relieve.
moves on right
What he
lane.
wants, we put so much spring pressure on, it's probably got like a 200 relief.
So
on that.
Simron takes out Dominique.
He doesn't wanna blow up the oil
Ferguson on
filter?
the left side, the 56 T-Bird. with a
Somebody
dial
Google what's
of
the burst
6
strength
seconds.
of a Wix fix.
I can tell you, I knocked one off at 100.
And
What? I
returns
knocked one
to
off
the
at
second
100.
round and hoping to move on to the third
So,
round with a dial
A Wix
of
oil
5.
filter, unless it's the R1, the R1 has like
Reynolds.
I don't know what else going on with it,
Yeah.
but I'd hate to send it
I
to the
know,
moon on one tire, and while Johnny's out there making his 55-mile-an-hour fast.
I'll open this up just to make sure everything looks okay inside. This is the oil pump that when we had the first when we first lost oil pressure, Chris handed me this pump in case the oil pan didn't fix it. You know, we changed the oil pan in the pickup and it fixed it, so I never went any further. I just left this thing rolling around. It was in the box, it wasn't rolling around, but it's on the floorboard of my truck, just sitting there. Okay, that looks pretty nice. So once I get the one out of the Belvedere, you'll have a look. There's all kinds of scratches inside of there, so we think maybe that happened. We got all the scratches and stuff from the cam that went flat, because it did have a flat cam in it. So I'm just gonna line this with some light grease, kind of help with the sealing process. Put an O-ring on it this time. Yeah. Could that little bit be the difference? There's our broken oil pressure gauge. 0 is now there. Let's see if I can find another one just like it. All right, so we got a new oil pump on there. I need to prime it. So I gotta pull the distributor, pull the intermediate shaft. I wanted to try to ground the orange box because I think that's probably the problem, why it's starting to cut out around 2500 or so. But I kind of don't feel like taking this stuff out and putting it back in, you know what I mean? I want to go to the MSD. The reason we didn't go to the MSD in the first place was a couple of reasons. First of all, this distributor I thought was for a low deck, is for a raised deck, 440, so it doesn't fit. So we ordered this spacer, comes with a clamp too, which basically allows you to run the 440 into a low deck engine. A 440 distributor and a low deck engine. The problem is it didn't come quick enough. It was like a last minute thing, and as it was, we finished the car Thursday afternoon, the day before the race. So we were not really willing to go any further, and it was running fine, so there was no need. So now that we're going to prime the engine, I'm kind of feeling like, screw it, I'm just going to take all this crap out and put the MSD in. I have no idea if this MSD stuff even works, so because it's all used stuff, so we'll see. Yeah, so that's where we're at. All right, so let's pull the cap off. I'm looking at the rotor. That could be why it wasn't running. That's pretty beat up. That could be a problem. Holy crap. Alright, so this is a big block, so to prime the engine you want to turn counterclockwise, not clockwise. Well, the adapter doesn't work with an MSD. Some bitch. Alright, back with the Chrysler distributor again.